2 girls, 1 victim. That night, something truly devastating happened.
I can't tell you the entire story of what happened that night because the type of violence that occurred was so appalling, and it lasted for at least 3 hours.
I mean, it was awful, really. You can't imagine 2 young girls doing that to another human being.
They attacked her with a shovel, with a coffee table, even a television. By the time they were finished, she had more than 100 separate injuries.
In the early morning of December 9th, 2014, an emergency call comes in at a British control center. A female employee answers the phone and quickly becomes so annoyed that she would prefer to hang up. Probably with good reason. On the other end of the line are 2 teenage girls, apparently very drunk. It's already the second time they're calling the police, asking them to please come now. The girls say they are cold and want to be picked up. The employee probably had a lot of thoughts running through her mind, but one thing she surely didn't think was that these 2 cheeky but harmless sounding girls had just tortured someone to death. Not much is known about Angela Wrightson, and that in itself says a lot about her life story. She came from a large working-class family in Britain and grew up in social housing. As an adult, she somehow lost contact with her family. Angela is an alcoholic, and it's difficult for her to take care of herself. Because of this, she is severely underweight, which makes her feel cold most of the time. Even in the summer, she walks around wearing several layers of clothing. She goes in and out of prison from time to time, not because she commits serious crimes, but because she keeps calling the emergency number, probably out of a deep feeling of desperation and loneliness, because no one is really there for her. Angela lives on 14th Stephen Street in Hartlepool. She stays alone in a flat inside one of those typical English terraced houses. For a while, she has a boyfriend named Billy, but he is also an alcoholic, and eventually he dies. Billy is likely the only partner Angela ever has, and his death becomes a turning point for her. And as one might expect, it only makes her addiction worse. As much as life hits Angela hard, she still manages to keep her warmth. Many people in her neighborhood know her, because Angela often sits on the steps outside her little terraced house and chats with anyone passing by. In the town, she's known as Alco Angie. When she does leave the store in front of her house, Angela usually walks to a nearby kiosk that sells cheap alcohol. Angie drinks several liters a day and is constantly intoxicated. Still, she often remembers to bring back a chocolate bar from the kiosk, which she puts in the mailbox for the little boy who lives next door. She sits outside on the steps in front of her house in all kinds of weather, whether it's windy or cold. Angela is always happy when someone stops for a moment and takes the time to have a short chat. Quite often, when she likes someone, she even invites them straight into her flat. Of course, that's not without risk. That's why her neighbors try to keep an eye on her as much as they can. They check in on Angela from time to time, and when they notice strange people going into her flat, they throw them out. Most of the people who visit the lonely woman are harmless, though. For the most part, they are lonely people too, who have turned to alcohol. They go by names like Cider Bill, Goofy, or Mad Molly. In December 2014, it's 2 teenage girls that Angela invites into her home, and it will be the last time she ever sits on her steps and opens her door to someone. The names of the 2 girls have been anonymized. In this video, we call them Olivia and Yasmin, just like the BBC does in a 2017 article that refers to police records. As mentioned, these are not their real names. Why we are doing it this way will be explained in the next chapter. But for now, let's focus on December 8th, 2014, the day Angela's life comes to an end. Olivia is 14 years old. Yasmin is 13. Olivia lives in a children's home. Yasmin lives with a foster family. That afternoon, both girls have some free time. In the evening, they're expected to return to their respective accommodations. but they don't. Olivia uses her day off to visit her mother. She was placed in a home because there were regular violent outbursts at home. When she turned only 11 years old, Olivia started drinking alcohol, using drugs, and running away from home or the children's home. When she shows up at her mother's door that afternoon, the 14-year-old is rejected. According to reports, her mother greets her with the words, "F you, why don't you just go away and kill yourself?" This leads to a heated argument between mother and daughter, which ends with Olivia's sister picking her up and taking her away. Before Olivia leaves, her mother hands the 14-year-old some strong tranquilizers and alcohol. At the same time, Angela is also having a really bad day. In the afternoon, her landlord stopped by, and they got into an argument. Angela was already drunk at that point. At some point later, as she often does, she goes outside and sits on the steps in front of her house. That's when Olivia and her friend Yasmin walk by. The three of them start talking. Angela agrees to buy the girls some alcohol and cigarettes. What exactly goes through Angela's mind, we can't know for sure. Most likely, she is simply happy to have some company. The girls wait in Angela's living room, while she, as promised, goes out and buys alcohol and cigarettes. Then she comes back home to the girls. Altogether, between the three of them, they drink around 6 liters of cider that evening. Later, traces of drugs and medication are also found in Olivia's system, possibly the tranquilizers her mother gave her earlier that day. But this evening doesn't just end with a hangover and a headache. The night ends with a death. When Olivia and Yasmin leave Angie's house, Angela has at least 70 cuts all over her body. On top of that, she has 54 injuries from blunt force trauma. More than half of her injuries are to her head or face. Angela tried to fight back and suffered additional defensive injuries, including 3 broken fingers. At least 27 of the blows to Angela were carried out with 14 different objects, including a table, a television, a printer, a shovel, picture frames and vases, a kettle, a metal strainer, and a wooden spoon. In other words, this was an act of violence of the worst and most brutal kind. It's believed that Angela's murder went on for about 2 hours. Shortly after 9 p.m., a selfie is taken with Yasmin's phone and posted to Snapchat. In the picture, Olivia and Yasmin can be seen, with Angela in the background. In the photo, you can already see a bruise forming on Angela's face. That means the girls have already started beating her by that time, and they continued doing so for the rest of the evening. Before midnight, they take a break. They leave Angela injured in her flat and go to visit a friend, only to return at 2 a.m. on the morning of December 9th. But they don't come back to help Angie. They come back to keep torturing her. 2 hours later, shortly after 4 a.m., Olivia and Yasmin finally leave. It's not clear whether Angela is unconscious at this point or already dead. What is clear, though, is that Olivia and Yasmin simply leave her there, without the slightest sign of regret. The two of them do call the police, but not to report what they did to Angela. They just want to be picked up. They assume that their caretakers have probably already reported them as missing, and seem to think it's a good idea to use the emergency number like it's a taxi service.
Hello, can you please?
I just rang. When are you going to come on freezing?
Sorry, you what? Hello?
I just reported myself missing. I've just...
You reported yourself missing? Shouting in my ear, can you just, what are you on?
Like, I've just rang to let the police know where me and my friend are at. Will you tell me how long I'm going to be on freezing, so do smoke hard?
There's no need to be swearing, ringing up and swearing and going on like that. What's your name?
Well, I'm cold.
What's your name? Right, and where are you? Suggett Street?
Yeah. Stephen Street.
Pardon? You're in Stephen Street?
Yeah.
What's so funny?
No, you're just be funny.
I'm not being funny.
Sure.
Right. So, listen, right, you're in Stephen Street. We'll get somebody along there as soon as we can, alright?
Yeah, but I'm afraid I'm a bit cold.
Right, okay. Bye.
Bye.
Angela Wrightson's body is found on the morning of December 9th by her landlord. After their argument the day before, he had decided to come back and sort things out. But he can no longer speak with Angela. She is already dead. The flat is completely trashed. Angela is naked from the waist down and lying covered in blood on her sofa. Olivia and Yasmin are arrested later that same day because they talked to friends about what they did and even mentioned possible prison sentences. And of course, something like that doesn't stay secret for long. In Olivia's room at the children's home, police later find a drawing. It graphically shows one person injuring another with a knife. The case causes shock and outrage across the whole of the UK, especially on social media. As you can imagine, the comment sections of British news outlets are flooded with all kinds of insults and hate against Olivia and Yasmin. The police take note of this. That's why, in June 2015, they instruct the press to delete all comments related to the trial and to completely disable the comment function. All hyperlinks in news articles have to be removed. Even sharing articles about the trial is meant to be banned. The BBC and other media outlets fight against this restriction, but they fail. From that point on, no one is allowed to report on the trial at all until a final verdict is reached, and that is done to protect Olivia and Yasmin. The goal is to prevent society from passing judgment on the two girls too soon. Angela's mother eventually can no longer attend the court hearings. Hearing again and again how brutally her daughter was attacked and how little remorse the two killers showed completely breaks her. In the end, both girls are sentenced to life in prison, even though they were only 13 and 14 years old when the crime happened. However, they are allowed to apply for parole after 15 years. That means they've already served 2/3 of their sentence. How they are doing in prison, whether they follow the rules, and whether they have a real chance of being released one day is unknown. Because the true identities of Olivia and Yasmin are still protected. In October 2020, there's another hearing about the anonymity of the two girls. It is decided that the identities of Olivia and Yasmin will remain protected for life. That means we will never know their real names. The goal is to make sure that reintegrating them into society won't be made harder, and that they won't be exposed to threats or hostility. In theory, though, this ruling is not set in stone. It could still change. But that would probably only happen if something serious occurred, like if Olivia or Yasmin committed more crimes. If that doesn't happen, they will have a new chance when they're released. A chance at a new life, steady jobs, a place of their own, maybe even a family. All the things Angela will never get. And no one they meet will ever guess what they did at the age of 13 and 14. You're probably wondering, just like I did while researching this, why Olivia and Yasmin did all this to Angela. Sure, the girls' backgrounds are incredibly sad, and they grew up in terrible conditions. But still, to torture a woman to death? In a BBC report, a very interesting source is quoted. Criminologist Carolyn Davis says, "When children kill, boys or girls between the ages of 10 and 17, it's usually for personal reasons, but often not someone they truly know. It's someone who reminds them of a hated person from their past, or someone they see as a version of what they themselves might become one day." Angela Wrightson also had an extremely hard life, both in childhood and adulthood. Her story isn't all that different from the stories of her killers. That's why it seems likely that Olivia and Yasmin, marked by alcoholism and poverty, saw their own future in Angela's life, and that they took out their hatred for their future selves on Angela in a symbolic way until she died. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments, especially about the decision to keep their names secret. Considering that the girls were only 13 and 14 years old when they killed Angela, that step seems understandable. But decisions like this are often criticized too. I'd love to know where you stand on that topic. Here you can find the sinister story of a mother who killed her own son. She made his life one big torture. Click on it. Until then, see you soon. Stay safe.